You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Hey Peter, good to have you back on the show, although you sound like you could be doing in better spirits than you are right now.
I went to a wrestling show this past weekend, and I think a byproduct of that is me losing my voice.
Either that or you caught a cold from the crowd because you were around hundreds of people.
That is definitely true, but it's once in a lifetime to see Rey Mysterio in 2016, so you make the trip.
That's true. His appearances are getting more and more infrequent as the days go by and his knees wear down, but it's funny we should talk about people being injured and not frequently seen, because I think Chris Lieben tops our news tonight to open.
Can't believe Chris Lieben is kicking off our podcast tonight. When was the last time we had him in the top story?
Well, this one tops any other top story that we probably topped, so it's unfortunate to find this out, but his heart is only pumping blood at 18% of capacity, less than 1/5 of what it should be, which means his big Bellator signing, which was touted last month, has now been put on hold. He has effectively been future endeavored from Bellator because they don't want to risk this guy dying in the cage.
There's an issue with his left ventricle, which is irregularly shaped now due to years of drug abuse.
Yeah, I hate to say he did it to himself, but there's literally no other way to describe it in this case. We all knew he was he had a troubled past, and he was trained to use fighting to get through that, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but unfortunately that troubled past has now caught up with him.
At least they caught it early and not before something catastrophic happened in the cage.
Well, that's why they didn't announce a fight or set a fight date for him, because he had to go through medical checkups to make sure he was cleared to fight. And like you said, it's better they caught this now than to let him go in there and fight and then have something horrible happen.
That's why they do those EKGs, that's for sure.
That's very true. I mean, it's paid off in wrestling to bring it back full circle. That's how MVP found out he had that Wolff-Parkinson syndrome and got the surgery that saved his life, because they did an EKG and checked his heart.
Yep, that's true. And it's good that, he might go to Bellator and do something else for them instead of fighting, perhaps announcing.
Well, Scott Coker's statement, which was released to Sherdog, and I published part of it on our news site, MMA Mania, the one I write for regularly. So when I say R, I'm meaning Mania, not Angry Marks, which is where you're hearing this show. Apologies for any confusion, but on our site, I quoted him as saying, we wish Chris the best in all of his future endeavors. And you know what future endeavors means when you're a wrestling fan like you or I, so I don't think he's doing anything for Bellator.
Kind of sad. You'd think even maybe as like a website contributor doesn't really require much physical activity.
I mean, they might still work with him down the road on something. I wouldn't say never, but as far as having a contract to be a fighter, that is definitely nixed. So whatever they do with him in the future, they'll have to start over from scratch.
Well, it's a pretty sad turn of events that hit our news desk today, but
well, we can look at the silver lining, because he knows he's got a medical issue now. He knows it's not in his best interest to fight, and maybe he can get heart surgery and correct the problem and live a long, healthy life. There could be good news to come out of this.
And he's only 35 years old.
Right. He's got the whole rest of his life ahead of him now. It's kind of like Daniel Bryan retiring. It was really sad. Nobody wanted to see him go, but he's young and he's got the rest of his life.
True. All right. So, are they going to rename UFC 196 Beware of Rear Naked Choke?
Yeah, or UFC 196, bet on the dog, win big.
Jeez.
You remember we talked about that guy who won all the money betting on Holly Holm, who said he was going to put $78,000 on Misha Tate? Boy, that guy is swimming in cash right now.
It's the biggest payout for mixed martial arts. $77,000 or $78,000, how much he put on that ticket, paid out over $300,000.
That guy should quit while he's ahead. He's cashed in twice now. The guy should quit while he's ahead.
Crazy. And this guy bet on Holm, bet on Tate, and didn't he bet on the Royals in the World Series?
I don't remember what his other bets were, but that is an incredibly fortuitous string of luck that man has had.
I just want to rename him Biff Tannen and get his sports almanac.
Yeah, I think you got a point there, but anyway, like I said to start, it was the night of upsets and betting on underdogs, so if you put your money on Nate Diaz or you put your money on Misha Tate, you made out well, but let's start with that main event. What did you think of the fact that Conor got choked out in the second round?
Well, Conor made a stupid mistake, and Nate just waited for his opportunity, took advantage, took him down, got his back, choked him out. Not saying it's an experience issue, but I think Conor took too much of a risk here going up 25 pounds.
Well, let's break that down two different ways. First, I want to address the last thing you said, and I don't know if it was too much of a risk because they were essentially the same size guy. I mean, this was a Nate Diaz that normally would fight at lightweight, not cutting weight, and he was 170, they fought at welterweight, and McGregor makes a huge cut to get down to featherweight, so him fighting at 170, they looked like about the same size guy. There was really not a gigantic size disparity. The only big difference would be Nate Diaz has a lot more experience fighting at higher weights than Conor McGregor does. And as Conor McGregor admitted in the post-fight press conference, he's used to hitting so hard at the lower weight classes that he can put guys away with just one or two punches. He should have realized he needed a lot more punches than that to put away Nate Diaz. And it's not as though he didn't land them. In that first round, he messed up Diaz's face pretty good. But in the second round, he got tagged with the rebuttal. The counter shot started to make him wobble a little bit. And what do fighters do when they get wobbled and they need to save themselves? They go to the ground. And he tried to go to the ground, and that's what cost him, because once Nate Diaz had him on the ground, he was in his domain. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu and knows how to take advantage of that situation, and he promptly did. So I wouldn't call it a mistake on Conor's part. He was in trouble either way. He was in trouble on his feet if he stood there getting clobbered, or he was on trouble on the ground if he went down and tried to save himself until he had time to recover. It was a bad situation no matter which way he chose, and he was going to end up losing either way in that case.
And Diaz in the post-fight interview was very classy with his response.
Well, for a Diaz brother, he was classy. I'm the new king of this motherfucker. That's about as classy as a Diaz brother gets.
Can you do one interview without dropping an MF bomb?
Probably not, but honestly, I really did like Nate Diaz in the post-fight press conference and the post-fight interviews. Compared to the antics of his brother Nick, he was actually calm, cool, and collected. He thanked Conor McGregor for taking the fight, said he didn't have to take the fight, I didn't have to take the fight. We both manned up and did it, so show him some respect, but I'm the new king around here. I beat the old king, I'm the new king. That's just about as classy as you're going to get from Nate Diaz or a Diaz brother in general. So my hat's off to him. He did say some nice things.
Now, I have to ask this because of the reputation of the Diaz boys. Please tell me the drug tests have come back clean.
I haven't heard about a failure. I haven't read about a failure. So if there's one out there waiting, we don't know about it yet. The sample obviously hasn't come back yet. But I think that's more Nick's bag than Nate's. I'm not saying he doesn't smoke, but he probably doesn't smoke as much as Nick does.
Doesn't have the anxiety issues.
I've always said this, and not that I think either one of them are going to be poster boys for Citizen of the Year, but of the two of them, Nate has always seemed like he's a little bit better screwed together than Nick.
And with the victory, there's talk that Diaz will be rewarded by getting a title shot against Lawler.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing, that Ruthless Robbie Lawler versus Nate Diaz may be a fight that gets made. I think Dana White has at least indicated he feels favorably about it. I don't think it's booked, but it's certainly out there as a possibility.
What do you do with Conor?
Well, Conor said as much in the post-fight press conference what you do with him. He said, I took a risk. I'll learn from it. I wasn't efficient with my energy. I didn't know what I needed to do fighting a bigger man. Maybe I need to go back to fighting the smaller men in my own weight class and defend the belt. I think that's what you do next. He took a non-title fight. It didn't work out in his favor, but hey, he tried. So he said he'll learn from that mistake. He'll grow as a person and he'll come back and do better. And I think if he goes back down to featherweight, he probably will.
And Aldo already called him out on Facebook.
Well, of course, he couldn't resist the opportunity. In fact, everybody's just kind of piling on Conor in general. I mean, okay, yeah, he talked a lot of shit, but he also made a lot of people a lot of money and made a lot of fight fans very happy. So don't just be there to piss on him when he fails. Be there to help him back up, because he's done a lot for the sport in the last year. And instead of celebrating a man's loss, maybe you could just take it as he needs to learn from it and grow and become better as a fighter, and it will make him better. He'll be better next time.
Let's move on to the co-main event. Miesha Tate against Holly Holm for Holm's bantamweight title.
Well,
and
it's no longer Holm's title. It's Tate's title now.
Going into the last round, I don't know about you, but a lot of people had this 3-1 for Holm going into the fifth.
I could see it 2-2. I could see it 3-1. The only thing I can't see it is 4-0. There's no way, because that second round, Tate came so close to finishing her. It was almost a 10-8. In fact, I believe at least a couple of scorecards out there had the fight as a draw because of Tate getting a 10-8. So going into that fifth round, if it had been a full round, it could have ended up a draw.
So, for those who didn't see it, Miesha Tate beat Holly Holm with the rear naked choke with, a minute 30 left?
Mm-hmm. As she put it in the post-fight interview, you have to risk it to get the biscuit. She decided that the only way she was winning that fight in the fifth round was to take Holly Holm down and submit her. And Holly Holm had done a pretty good job of blocking most of the takedowns, except for the second round, which Tate just absolutely woman-handled her throughout that entire second round. But in the fifth, she was like, if I don't get the takedown now and if I don't submit her now, this goes to the judges and it might not work out for me. So she went after that takedown hard and didn't let up on it and got it. And once she got her back, she was not going to let go for anything. And Holm tried to get out of it. She tried to suplex her way out of it. And, Tate just hung on for dear life. And when she hit the ground, that choke sunk in even deeper. And at that point, Holm was fucked. And she didn't even tap out. She passed out. She just went to sleep.
And, it's something to be said about Ronda Rousey being in attendance for the show. Oh, wait, she wasn't there, was she?
She was at the Pro Wrestling Guerrilla All-Star Weekend show in Reseda. In fact, she had to get a text from Dana White telling her what happened, and she replied back and said, "Well, back to work for me."
She doesn't have Fight Pass on her phone?
Well, I think people around her were probably trying to get a stream of it, and she might have been herself, but I can speak from experience of having been in that American Legion in Reseda. That many people using cell phones in that small a space, you're not going to get much of a signal, let alone be able to stream anything.
Fair enough. So, there were some big names in attendance at the show.
Yes, George St.
Including-
Pierre sitting front row, which had the whole internet going nuts like Paul Wall.
I don't know what to make of it. It could be nothing. It could be something.
A lot of people seem to think that if Conor had won that fight, that Dana White was going to book GSP versus Conor. I don't know if I buy that theory either, but that's the one that gets spread around on the message boards right now, is that Conor versus GSP was going to headline UFC 200.
It's a stretch.
I know. And obviously Conor didn't win, so that's no longer in the cards anyway. But I think GSP is one of those people that anytime he wants a front row ticket to UFC, if he asks Dana White for one, he's going to get it. Because speaking of people who've made a lot of money for that man over the years, GSP is probably at or near the top of the list of people who've made Dana White and the Fertitta brothers a shit ton of money.
Well, before we move on to the rest of the main card and the other fights on this show, there was some big news coming out of the UFC press conference leading up to this show in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
The first Canadian show has been announced for those who are living under a rock, and it's going to be right here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
You mean first of 2016, because there have been plenty of fights in Canada.
Yeah, but first show of this year. It's going to happen in basically the halfway mark of the year.
Mm-hmm.
June 18th.
And they've got one hell of a main event on tap with your favorite fighter, Aries.
Against Wonderboy Thompson.
Yeah, the winner of that is probably a number one contender right out of the gate to fight for the title.
Aries won't get a big hometown pop from the crowd, and who am I kidding?
Yeah, he'll be treated like a conquering hero.
Yeah, he'll get treated better than Alfredson.
I bet.
But anyway, so that was the big news here. It was weird how they kind of slid it under the radar at first, because they have this huge video wall, and they show the upcoming dates, and it just said Vegas, 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 Ottawa. I'm like, wait, what? Because they'd never been here before, so I had to do like the Nestle double take, spit takes. Am I seeing this properly? And there's only one thing that's still not hammered down, and
The venue?
I've actually had people. Yeah, the venue hasn't been announced yet.
Well, what do you think are the possibilities? Go ahead and list them.
Well, the one thing that I hear is that because where the Ottawa Senators play hockey is not a Ticketmaster venue, it's like the guy who owns the Sens owns the ticket office called Capital Tickets.
Right.
So there could be an issue there. It's a June show. Some people are saying have it at the football stadium. It's a fight night.
Yeah. I don't know if you fill a football stadium with a fight night, but then again, it is Rory McDonald and Wonderboy Thompson. Maybe that's enough to get a good crowd in there.
It'd be a first. It's a nice stadium where they have the football in downtown Ottawa, so.
Mm-hmm. And if you offer some affordably priced tickets instead of Las Vegas prices, then you might get a really good turnout.
Now, my question to you is, on an average fight night, what is the attendance usually like?
Well, it depends on the city, the venue, and the card. So there's really no such thing as an average fight night. But if it's a good card and you're playing in a venue that seats like 15,000, let's say a good fight night card would do 80% of capacity, maybe higher, depending on how excited the local market is. But I wouldn't go beyond that because a fight night is usually not quite as star-studded as a pay-per-view. And when you have the pay-per-views, every last ticket is always going to be snapped up. Unless it's a really weak pay-per-view, like a card headlined by Demetrius Johnson. No offense to DJ, because I love him, but he's not a draw, and when he main events, those pay-per-views don't do good buy rates. So it's all relative, really. You can't even say there's such a thing as an average in either case.
Well, I think it's going to be the Corral or the what's it called now, Canadian Tire Center,
I was
where the
waiting for you to say
Sens play.
I was waiting for you to say it was going to be there, but you seemed to hem and haw your bets because of the whole Ticketmaster thing.
Well, I think there's a reason why it hasn't been announced yet. We just haven't been told what that reason is, and it's leading to a lot of speculation.
Yeah, well, that's what the internet's good for, is speculation. So, should we get back to the rest of this UFC 196 card and get it over with and get through the rest of these fights?
Well, on the main card, Yuri Latifi beat Gian Violante, unanimous decision. Corey Anderson beat Tom Lawler, unanimous decision.
Wait. First, the Latifi fight, really boring. Don't need to watch it. He just took him down a lot. You can skip that. But the Lawler fight, we cannot cruise over the fact that 2 out of 3 judges gave all 3 rounds to Corey Anderson. That's fucking impossible.
Now, maybe they're not fans of Lawler's antics at the weigh-ins.
Doesn't matter. There's no way in hell that Filthy Tom did not win that first round. He rocked Corey Anderson. He had him hurt. He nearly finished him. That is a definite 10-9 for Tom Lawler. There is no way Corey Anderson won all 3 of those rounds. The third round, definitely. The second round could go either way. The first round, Lawler definitely won that round.
Well, at least he was it was a competitive fight from his perspective. It's not like it was, the scorecards say one thing, but people who watch the fight say another.
Absolutely. Anybody that watched that fight knows that Corey Anderson did not dominate that fight for all 3 rounds. Not even close.
All right. What about the opening contest?
Shevchenko? Well, yeah. Nunez, as she is wont to do, was very, very strong for the first 10 minutes, had Shevchenko in trouble several times. Then in the third round, because she's so muscular and so jacked up, she just totally ran out of gas, which is what she does all the time in fights. The later the fight goes, the more tired she gets. And Shevchenko finally turned it around and started taking advantage of her, but too little too late. She had already given up 2 rounds, so she lost on the scorecards.
Looking at the prelims, I want to give a special award to Eric Silva.
What, for getting his block rocked by Nordine Talib?
Well, if you ever watched the movie Major League, it's the Trojan Condoms Boner of the Week award.
Yeah, I know the movie. I know the reference.
In the first round, he gave a cheap shot to his opponent. Basically, here, tap gloves, and then he sucker punched him.
Yeah, I saw that. I remember that.
And the second round, Talib just rocked him.
Yeah, I think he was tired of playing it conservative, which he had been doing for the entire first round, just kind of measuring the distance and figuring out what the best strategy was with Silva. And Silva cheap shotted him, as you noted. So the second round, he's like, out of hell with it. I'm just going to charge at him and see what happens. And it worked.
And he'll never do that again.
I would say Silva will never do that again, but I think people will definitely be watching for him to throw a cheap shot on a glove tap. People are not going to fall for it now.
No. But there is such a thing as like the hockey gods and the baseball gods. You gotta think there's the MMA gods as well.
It did sort of feel like poetic justice when Talib got the finish. It's like, well, serves you right for being an ass.
And one other fight I did want to mention, and then you can talk about any fight you want. Diego Sanchez and Jim Miller.
I had a feeling you were going to talk about that one. Do we both agree at this point that Jim Miller is completely done?
I don't want him to be done, though.
Nobody does, but he's just not competitive anymore. He's not a top 15 lightweight. He's not doing well in fights. This is, let's see, let me look at the stats here. This is fourth loss in the last 5 fights, and he's being beaten by guys he would have once beaten, you know, Beneil Dariush, Michael Chiesa, Diego Sanchez. The fact that he's being beaten by these guys says to me his career is on the tail end, whether he thinks so or not.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if a trip to the minors would be good for him or not. You know,
I can't see him taking a trip to the minor leagues. Can you see Jim Miller headlining an RFA card or a Legacy Fighting card? I don't see that as realistic for him, given he's been in the UFC for so long. I mean, we're talking like all the way since 2008. You think he really wants to go back to the minors after being in the big leagues for 8 years?
No.
Probably not. He'd probably just retire or coach.
All right. So is there any other fight you want to talk about here?
Well, I'll give a shout to the Sear the Great versus Brandon Thatch fight, because Sear is one of those guys that, you know, he calls himself Sear the Great, but you never quite know whether he's as great as he says he is. But he fought a very smart, very tactical fight with Brandon Thatch, a guy who was also once tagged as a prospect and hasn't quite lived up to those expectations. And I'd say this was a fun, competitive, great main event for FS1, and I think it led into the pay-per-view well, because Sear did everything he needed to do to win and then finished with an arm triangle in the 3rd round. So I take my hat off to him. He was, in fact, a great fighter on this night. He earned his nickname.
So, one last thing before we move on. I think Conor, regardless of a win or a loss, takes home over $1 million.
Yeah, he got $1 million just to show up. That's how big this pay-per-view was. And it really was big, because people who didn't normally order it were ordering it and talking about it on social media. Conor was trending long before the main event on Twitter. This fight was a big deal. He earned that $1 million because he probably made UFC 10 or 20 times as much.
All right, let's move on to Bellator 151 from Thackerville, Oklahoma.
That's right. I know you're having trouble with your voice tonight, Peter, so perhaps we won't go into depth about every single fight on this card. We might just skip over a few, but we should talk about the main event. Darian Caldwell just dismantling Joe Warren in a way that we don't normally see Joe Warren get manhandled, but he got out-wrestled, he got choked out on the ground, he went out as opposed to tapping out, so a technical submission, 3:23 of the first round, but Caldwell proved everything he said coming into that fight. He said, I'm younger, I'm better, I'm stronger, I'm faster, I'm hungrier, and these guys in the bantamweight title don't want no piece of me. And he even made that point again after he choked out Joe Warren. He said, Marcos Galval, you're a fucking pussy. And they had the censor button ready, but they got the effing part, but not the pussy part. That still got on the air.
Another technical submission.
Indeed. Well, it was kind of a weekend for that. So Caldwell got us started off, and Miesha Tate finished it off. Literally.
No, when I see, like, When you said technical submission, I thought that one where he screamed.
No, that was a verbal submission.
Verbal, right? Okay.
No, so
All right.
that was the big main event of Bellator 151. And to briefly touch on the other fights, Fernando Gonzalez eked out a split decision over Gilbert Smith. And I like Fernando, but I'm not sure I agree with the judges on this one, but we'll just let it be what it is. 28-29 and 29-28 times 2. Fernando picks up his 5th win in a row in the welterweight division and probably deserves a title shot. Bubba Jenkins and Goichi Yamauchi. Jenkins out-wrestled him. He pretty much had his way with him, and Yamauchi could never get a submission going on the ground, which is his bread and butter, so Jenkins, looking pretty dapper afterwards in a pimp hat and shades, and started calling out everybody else in the featherweight division, saying his time is now. So good for our friend Bubba. I was happy to see that. He made it entertaining in the post-fight interview. And then to open the show, a fight we don't need to talk about more than the result. Showtime Anglo, 29-28 times 3 over Sirwan Kakai. Boring fight.
What about the Gracie Carroll fight on the prelims?
That one shouldn't have gone 3 rounds. Neiman Gracie should have found a way to finish him on the ground, but Carroll, even though he's a mediocre fighter, he's been a fighter for so long that he knows submission defense, and he knows to tuck his chin and not leave it open for a rear naked choke. So he survived, but that's all he did was survive. 30-26 and 30-27 times 2.
I fought a Gracie and survived. That should be a t-shirt.
I survived a Gracie. I'll make that shorter for you.
There you go. I survived a Gracie on the back, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt.
Winner! Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
All right. Any big, I'm looking at the card here. There was a submission with guillotine, submission via strikes, couple of split decisions, TKO. Nothing really stands out on the prelims?
Nothing to write home about. They were just average Bellator prelims. You know, I suppose if I would say anything, I hate to do it, but you forced me to say something. I would say that Jermaine Barnes and Derek Palmer didn't look like a fight that belonged on anybody's card anywhere. One guy was making his pro debut. The other guy was 0-1. And this was as sloppy of a fight you'll ever see on a professional card as I can think of.
Wow. Like,
if it tells you anything, one of these guys, I believe Barnes, was a backyard brawler for Dada 5000.
Oh God. No, please no.
Yes, definitely yes, because he was wearing the BYB Backyard Brawl trunks.
BY what?
That's the name of Dada's organization, BYB Backyard Brawl.
Oh, okay.
You asked me to say something about the prelims. That's all I can tell you. And and he won though. He punched out Derek Palmer, so good for him.
Did you want to talk about the press conference with the UFC with Jones and Cormier, and Jones coming out with the belt he never lost?
I have my qualms with that, and I know they're using it to promote UFC 197, and that's going to be a big show, but at the same time, the whole problem with Jones is that he gets too full of himself and then he makes mistakes because he thinks he's above reproach. That's how he kept getting into trouble and getting DUIs and having hit and run and all this other stuff. So for him to walk around with that air of conceitedness with his belt, like, you never beat me, I'm still the champion. No, dude, you're not the champion. It doesn't matter whether you lost it in the cage or you got stripped of it for being a dumb shit. You're not the champion. You can't fool me with that. You can call yourself the uncrowned champion, but walking around with a belt like you're still king of the motherfucker, you're not.
Well, the crowd at the press conference was very pro Jones.
I think because he's been gone for long enough that they actually kind of buy his argument of being the uncrowned champion.
Well, I guess a couple things that have been coming out in recent days as a result of like upcoming shows, especially UFC 200. Now with Rousey's schedule, I mean, you could put Tate versus Rousey in like December, but why not have Tate home too at UFC 200?
Well, I suppose you could do a rematch, but to me, it just seems like it's more interesting to get Ronda Rousey into this mix because I go back and play back all the old shows where we talked about this months and months and months ago, and I said it back then. I said, if Rousey loses, it's a no-lose situation, and if Tate beats whoever she loses to, that just sets up multiple rematch opportunities for Rousey to come back or Rousey to fight Tate if Tate ends up the champion. There's no way to lose in this in this scenario. And that's exactly what we've got here. If Ronda Rousey fights Miesha Tate, it's a trilogy fight. And if Ronda Rousey fights Holly Holm, she can get revenge to get the trilogy fight. You can't lose.
But Rousey's schedule, she won't be available to fight till December because she's in a tight filming schedule right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tate could always take on somebody else. I don't know if you give the immediate rematch to Holm and screw up any further plans they might have because, you know, Tate Rousey is going to be the biggest money out there. If you give Tate another fight because she doesn't want to wait, you're risking the same thing you did with Holly Holm saying she wanted another fight because she didn't want to wait. Not that I had a problem with it. It worked out the best way I think it could have, but it just how many times do you want this title to change hands before Ronda Rousey gets back?
Well, let's move on to Rizin MMA. They made a big signing.
Yep, Vanderlei. Although, I really don't think that's a coincidence considering Bellator also announced they had signed Vanderlei, so I think because of the fact that Rizin and Bellator have this cross-promotional relationship like we saw with the Fedor Emelianenko return show, I feel like they're doing something to keep Vanderlei busy. He can fight in Japan for Rizin since he can't fight in the United States for another year. That they're just working with Bellator to give him something to do in the meantime.
But he's still suspended, though.
Right, so the Japanese commissions are just going to blatantly ignore that fact. If they let him do kickboxing or MMA or whatever he decides to do, they're just going to pretend that he's not suspended, which
it sets an ugly precedent, though.
Of course it does. I've always argued there should be reciprocity, not just among commissions, but among states and countries. So I don't agree with it. I'm just saying it's going to happen.
Okay, so I've got a really funny story to end this news, but we're not there yet. But did you hear who's joining season 22 of Dancing with the Stars?
Yes, Paige Van Zandt.
That's an interesting signing there.
I believe she actually has a background as a dancer, so this could bode very well. She could be the sleeper coming in to run the table.
She's a ringer then.
Yeah, sleeper, ringer, whatever you want to call her.
So the odds have already come out for a potential fight between Tate and Rousey for the title.
Mm-hmm.
Rousey is the substantial favorite.
Well, owing to the fact that she's beaten her 2 times before, that's not shocking.
No. So we talked about
yeah,
Lieben.
Just to finish up what I was saying, I looked it up and I'm right. She grew up with her parents owning a dance studio, so Paige Van Zandt did ballet, jazz, and hip-hop dancing for over 13 years.
Oh, wow.
So she's a definite ringer.
And the last news item on my list this week, and I apologize everybody for my voice being the way it is. Do you remember that show we talked about? There's going to be boxing and wrestling and UFC or MMA.
Right, the UR Fight Show coming up on the 20th, and our friend good old JR, Jim Ross, will be calling it.
Oh, God, really?
You didn't hear that? And don't go, oh, God, I like Jim Ross. I'm happy he's calling it.
Oh, that's not the news I was talking about. That's news to me.
Oh. Well, what's your news?
They had to replace Ken Shamrock because of that medical suspension like we talked about last week.
Yeah, so who did they bring in to replace him?
Oh, Stevie.
Dan
They brought
Severn?
in someone.
Dan Severn?
No, well, Dan Severn's the opponent.
Oh, that's right. That's who he was facing. Okay.
Tank Abbott.
Well, I guess at least they found a guy around the same age and around the same amount of experience. So if you're going to do the geriatric fight, that would be the way to go.
I don't even want to see what the Todd's odds are on that fight, I tell you.
Well, we'll get him back and we'll ask him at some point.
All right, well, that's all the news on my list. What about you there, boss?
Well, it's a pretty quiet week. Bellator ran 3 shows 3 weekends in a row, but now they're off until April, which gives me a little bit of breathing room. And UFC is off until the fight night in Brisbane, which is Frank Mir and Mark Hunt, so got a little bit of a break there. We do have a World Series of Fighting show on Saturday, which is pretty much a one-fight card, if I'm going to be honest about it. It's Justin Gaethje defending the lightweight title against Brian Foster, but I got interviews with both of them on MMA Mania, so go check out what the main eventers have to say about the title fight this weekend. And if you're not doing anything on Saturday night, tune in to NBC Sports and watch Justin Gaethje do work.
And those are also on YouTube?
Yes, indeed. YouTube.com/AngryMarks.com.
All one word.
Yes, indeed.
All right, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.